Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel, and today I just want to share some thoughts on the upcoming possible reboot of Charmed. So start off way back with Charmed itself. I fell in love with the show probably near the end of season 7. Me and my cousins stumbled upon it on TV one holidays while we were staying at my Nana Pop's place, and we just like fell in love with it, and we were confused obviously because it was season 7. We watched some of like the current stuff as it was coming out, and then we went back to the very beginning and watched from the start, and the three of us like fell in love with the show, and it was a real like just a big bonding thing for us as well, because we all like really loved the show. We talked about the show. There was even a period where we would pretend to be the Charmed ones and be witches and things like that. I mean, I'm talking, we were like, how old would we have been? We were like 10 kind of thing, 10, 11, actually between 9 and 11 probably, the three of us. So it was really fun. It was a great bonding thing, and so Charmed will always have a special place in my heart. It's a show that I binge watch at least once a year, and I really flip and enjoy it. And so ever since the show has ended, I've always like been really wanting to see like a spin-off of the show where we either have a reunion where we just have all the original characters back together again, or we spin off into the next generation and have the focus on like Chris and Wyatt and all the other kids, and maybe just a bit of the original Charmed ones thrown in just for good measure. That's what I've always wanted to see. Actually, the company Zenescope purchased the rights to Charmed a few years ago now, I think it was. Like 5 years ago probably. They started so that they could officially continue the series in graphic novel form, and I've got and they've continued it in seasons. So there's season 9, and I think they've finished season 10, possibly started on season 11, I don't really know. And I've read all of season 9. I need to continue on with season 10. But that's a really great continuation because it sticks to the original story of Charmed, but continues it on in a way that is still very true to the original and still has that feeling of the original. And at least when I've read it and looked at the graphic novels, like it feels like you could imagine it actually playing out on screen and things like that. So I've been happy with that, but at the end of the day, I've always wanted to actually have something on screen, be it just a quick little reunion or a little spin-off series or something. So when news of a reboot dropped, I was initially very excited until I read that it wasn't going to feature the original cast. The original premise for this reboot, which we found out about sometime last year, it was a while ago, I feel like maybe 6 months ago, maybe even more, was that it was going to be set during the 1970s, so during the time when the Charmed ones were actually born. It was going to follow these 3 witches who didn't seem to have any sort of connection, who were living in probably San Fran, I'm not quite sure. So it was going to be set in the 70s following these 3 witches who find out they're witches, but it wasn't going to be, I think from the premise that they weren't related, they possibly didn't know each other or something like that, I'm not quite sure. I was like, okay, that sounds interesting, I'll maybe give it a go when it comes out. Like it didn't sound or feel like Charmed, it was just going to use the Charmed name. And then, so more recently then this year, it's when it's really been coming out, what the CW is planning with this reboot. Firstly, it came out that, it was actually going to be set in present day, and that these characters were actually going to be sisters. And I was like, oh, okay, that's definitely more tied to the original and definitely more connected to Charmed, so I feel like I probably could use the Charmed name compared to what the original premise was, where it wasn't really connected to the show. This sounded interesting. I was like, okay, I definitely am going to give this show a go now. Until now, it's come out with more stuff. One thing was they wanted to make one thing that they really want to do with this reboot is make it feminist. I'm sorry, but the original show was about these 4 really powerful, strong women who were kicking butt and who were leading their own lives and who weren't being like told what to do by men. Like, it was a very empowering show for women. How can you make that more feminist? Another addition that I think is actually cool, but has been, the way it was reported was a little bit like plot twisty. It was one of the sisters is gay, she has a girlfriend, and that's cool because that was something that was missing from the original show. They didn't have any LGBTQ plus representation, which I mean, like back then it wasn't a big deal. Obviously now you sort of want to have that more representation. But the way it was reported was if it was like, shock, oh my god, plot twist, one of them is gay. It was like, well, it really has nothing to do with it. It's a really nice addition. It doesn't need to be like that. It's a huge plot twist and a huge change. And then recently it came out about who the different characters were because they're going to be casting for the pilot. And again, they're 3 sisters, all college age. They all start with M, their names start with M, and from the sounds of it, it essentially is meant to kind of pick up from season 4. We have a character who believes she is related to the other 2 sisters, and then we have these 2 sisters who live together, they're sisters, they have powers, and I think they've got, at least I think they've gone through a loss. So I'm assuming maybe they've lost a sister, maybe even lost a parent, I don't really know. But it's from the sound of it, it's definitely picking up from season 4. And I think the powers were the same except one could hear thoughts, which I mean, I think that was mind reading. I think that was one of them. Anyway, it's very much carbon copied but different at the same time. I've definitely got mixed thoughts on it because as much as I want to support something that is a reboot of one of my favorite shows, it doesn't really feel like a reboot. For example, one of the shows I've been loving recently is Dynasty, which is a reboot of the 1980s soap opera, and they've rebooted it how you would expect a reboot to be. All the characters are the same, like characters' names are the same, characters' storylines are relatively same, they've just updated the show for the modern era. So they do have quite a focus on strong women in business. One of the characters is actually one of the characters in the original show was gay, but a character now is actually a guy who was a girl in the original and is gay. There's people of color representation, like it's a very modern take on Dynasty, but it sticks to what the original show was kind of all about. Not that I ever watched Dynasty, but from what I've read about Dynasty, like the show's sticking to it quite well, just updating it. This Charmed reboot isn't really that. A reboot similar to the Dynasty reboot would be to take the show we already know and love and update it for the modern times. But I mean, the show only finished 10 years ago. It's actually quite soon for a reboot like that. If you were going to like reboot the show, you'd make it a spin-off or as a direct continuation. Or like a reunion. That's not even what this is either. When this was first announced, I was like very skeptical. I didn't really like what the original premise was, and I've always been since that point thinking if the CW wanted to do a witch show, they should have created one from scratch that was new, that could stand on its own, that wouldn't use the Charmed name in order to get views. Because it is kind of dirtying the legacy of Charmed. It's been 10 years since the show finished. The show is still very relevant today. It's still very much a loved show. It's definitely too soon to reboot it like that, how they're planning on rebooting it. Like if you waited another 10-20 years, then you could reboot it and, you know, revamp the story for 10 and 20 years time. But no, this show is seriously just using the Charmed name, the Charmed logo, the Charmed legacy to create a viewership for a show that isn't actually going to probably stand up to the epicness of the original or even come close to it. So many fans are so annoyed and pissed at what the CW is doing with this show and how they're tarnishing the Charmed name. And I mean, even one of the actresses of the original show has been so vocal about her disappointment and her dislike at this reboot and the developments that keep coming out about it. And that is Holly Marie Combs, who played Piper. She has been very vocal on Twitter about how the reboot is trying to relaunch this show and make changes to it that was actually always there. When it came out that they wanted to make it more feminist, she was quite hurt, I suppose, that they wanted to make this show more like a feminist show, when for its time and even still today it is very much a feminist show about empowering women, and I don't know how you can build on that. And she was even like that as well. Initially she was like, you know what, it doesn't matter, we wish them well, it should be alright. But the more that's come out about it, the more she's been very vocal about it and very vocal against it. And I think that says a lot when you have one of the original cast members, when you have a cast member of the original version of the show saying how much this is wrong and how it's not working with the legacy. I think you have a problem. And fans have already come out saying they want this reboot to be stopped, and I kind of do agree with them. I'm interested to see what happens with pilot casting and any more information that comes out, I'm still very interested to see what happens. But I feel like that when the pilot comes, if it ever comes, it's probably not going to be that well received. And if the show ever actually comes out, it is not going to be very well received at all. I feel like the CW has done a big mistake in that they should have made their own witch show. They should have made their own story, their own characters, and their own legacy, instead of trying to tap onto the end of someone else's legacy and someone else's brand, because it's not working with the legacy of the show. I feel like this show, if they'd made it stand on its own without being connected to Charm at all, it probably would have worked really, really well. Like, I definitely would be interested in watching a witch show. I'm definitely very excited to watch Sabrina the Teenage Witch when it comes out. And like, that's a show that is definitely rebooting the original show based off also the comics. But the time frame works better for that. And considering we've got the Riverdale Archie world, like the Sabrina reboot and the Sabrina, like the new Sabrina series, isn't out of place. Charmed one definitely is. If the CW was really keen on making a witch show, they should have done it to stand on its own rather than tagging on the end of the Charmed legacy, because it's not what fans want. Fans want a spin-off with the kids or a reunion or something like that, not a reboot that is kind of ruining everything the show was all about. I mean, the only thing I like about this reboot, from what we've heard already, is that one of the characters is gay. That's it. So yeah, I'm interested to see what else comes out. I'd love to know your thoughts in the comments below. I know there are a couple of people who I've been talking to on Twitter who are like, no, this reboot, it's just no. As I said, I'm gonna give it a chance, like a bit of a chance, if the pilot ever sees the light of day, or it ever comes out. I'm definitely gonna give it a chance, but I can tell you now that even if it's somewhat okay, I'm probably not gonna like it, because Charmed has a big place in my heart, and it's really hard to, you know, change that and try to improve on that. And I don't know. I feel like the CW is going about this all the wrong way, and it's getting so much slack for it. I don't think I've seen many people saying how excited they are for this show. Most of the comments I've seen are people who are like, no, stop this reboot, get the original cast, do it properly, you know. And I'm pretty sure the original cast would actually be up for doing some sort of reboot, reunion, spin-off thing if it's done right. So anyway, I'd love to know your thoughts in the comments below. Well, let's just see what happens with this. If you guys enjoyed this video, and I will see you guys soon with another one. Bye!